Chapter 1. The day everything shattered. The courtroom felt colder than usual that morning. Not in temperature, in atmosphere. The kind of cold that seeps into your bones and makes your breath feel heavier. I sat there at the defendant's table, hands cuffed in front of me, trying to focus on the smooth grain of the polished wood instead of the rows of strangers staring at me like I was already dead. The fluorescent lights hummed faintly above, casting a pale, lifeless glow on everything. There was the faint scent of paper, cheap coffee, and too many bodies crammed into a small space. My pulse thudded in my ears. I could hear the scrape of chairs as the jury filed in. Every footstep sounded like a nail being hammered into my coffin. "All rise," the bailiff's voice echoed. The judge entered, black robe swaying, face carved into something between authority and indifference. Judge Peterson. I'd seen that look before on job inspectors walking through my construction sites. The kind of man who has already made up his mind before opening the report. I searched the gallery until my eyes found her. Elena, my wife. She was sitting in the front row, her legs crossed, hands folded neatly in her lap. Her hair was styled to perfection, the kind of effort she used to save for anniversaries or business galas. I wanted to believe it was for me, that she wanted to look her best in support of her husband on the worst day of his life. But there was something in her posture, relaxed, almost casual, that didn't fit. Her gaze met mine briefly. No tears, no quiver in her lip, just a faint, unreadable smile. Victor Hale sat beside her, my business partner, my best friend since college, a man who had toasted at my wedding, who'd once loaned me 10 grand to keep a project alive. Today, he looked every bit the polished executive. Tailored navy suit, silk tie, hair slicked back. His hand rested casually on the back of Elena's chair. Too casually. I told myself I was imagining it. I had to be. The judge cleared his throat, and the sound sliced through my thoughts. Michael Carter, Judge Peterson began, voice steady as stone. This court has reviewed the evidence presented, the fraudulent financial records, the testimony of witnesses, and the expert analysis confirming deliberate embezzlement from Carter and Hale Construction. Each word felt like a hammer strike. My shoulders tensed. I wanted to shout, to tell them it was all lies, that I'd never stolen a cent. But I'd already tried that. They'd already decided. This court finds you guilty on all counts. There it was. Final. No escape. The judge's voice lowered, but it somehow grew heavier. For the crimes committed, and in light of the scale of the fraud, I hereby sentence you to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Life. It was just a word, but it hit me like a physical blow. My breath caught in my chest, and, for a second, the world blurred. The sound of pens scribbling on legal pads. The click of a camera shutter. Somewhere in the back, someone gasped quietly. Life. I turned instinctively toward Elena, desperate for some sign. A tear, a flinch, something to tell me I wasn't completely alone. Instead, I saw her lean toward Victor. And then it happened. She kissed him. Not a quick, polite brush of the lips. No, this was slow, deliberate, like they had all the time in the world. Her hand slid up to his cheek, nails grazing his jawline. His arm tightened around her. For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. When she pulled away, she tilted her head just enough for me to catch her profile, her lips curling into a smirk. And then, softly, just loud enough for me to read her mouth, she said, "Such a shame, rot in prison, loser." The words weren't even shouted, but they echoed in my head louder than the judge's sentence. My knees felt weak, and if the guards hadn't been right there, I might have fallen. "Let's go," one of them muttered, tugging me by the arm. The clink of the chains at my wrists was deafening now. I tried to keep my eyes forward as they led me past the gallery, but I couldn't stop myself from looking at her one more time. She didn't even bother to look guilty. She was laughing at something Victor whispered in her ear. My former best friend. Then I saw Lily. She was sitting between Elena and her mother, my mother-in-law, her tiny legs dangling above the floor. Her wide brown eyes locked on mine, so much like her mother's, yet so different in their innocence. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't crying either, just watching me with that quiet, serious expression she sometimes had when she was figuring out how something worked. The guard pushed me forward. We were nearly at the door when I felt a small, quick touch against my hand. I glanced down. Lily's fingers, no bigger than the links of my chain, slipped something into my palm with a speed that told me she didn't want anyone to see. I closed my fist instinctively, and then she was gone from view. The heavy courtroom door swung shut behind me, sealing me in a narrow hallway that smelled of disinfectant and old paint. The world outside that door didn't matter anymore. The walk to the holding area was a blur, metal gates sliding open, guards chatting idly about lunch breaks as if my entire life hadn't just been destroyed. Someone patted me down again, more out of routine than necessity. Hours later, though it could have been minutes or days for all I knew, I found myself in a cell. For walls of peeling paint, a toilet in the corner, a steel-framed bunk. My new world. It was only then, when the echo of footsteps faded and the cell door clanged shut, that I opened my hand. A folded piece of paper, no bigger than a grocery receipt. I recognized the handwriting instantly. Big, uneven letters, some of them backward, drawn with the kind of fierce concentration only a child can have. I sat on the edge of the bed, my chains rattling faintly as I smoothed the paper open. Don't worry, Dad. Wait for 12 days only. I fixed everything. I stared at it. Read it again. And again. My chest tightened, and for the first time since the sentence, I felt something other than despair. 12 days. Fixed everything. What the hell did she mean? Chapter 2. Before the betrayal. Before the courtroom. Before the chains. Before the smell of bleach and steel that would come to define my days. There was the life I thought I'd built to last. Back then, my world was dust, sweat, and blueprints. I owned Carter and Hale Construction, and for years, it was my pride. My morning started before sunrise. I'd pour myself into the work, framing houses, overseeing site crews, hammering out contracts. Long days, longer weeks, but every nail I drove and every deal I signed had a purpose. Elena and Lily. Our home reflected that. A modest two-story in a good neighborhood, white trim, freshly painted porch. Lily's laughter would fill the halls in the evenings, and I'd come home to Elena's warm smile and the smell of dinner in the oven. She had that kind of beauty that made people turn their heads twice. Long chestnut hair, green eyes that seemed to change shade with her mood, and a confidence that wrapped around her like a designer dress. My friends used to joke, "Mike, how the hell did a guy like you land her?" I just laugh it off. Hard work, my friend. The kind of work you can't do with your hands. She was my queen, and I made sure she knew it. Vacations to the coast, anniversary dinners at the best restaurants in town, surprise weekend getaways. She'd post pictures online, us smiling on a pier, her clinking champagne glasses with me, captions like "lucky to have him." If only I'd noticed the cracks forming in that perfect picture. It started small. Late night outings with her girlfriends. "They're going through a rough time," she'd explain, slipping on heels while checking her reflection in the mirror. "They just need a night out." I'd kiss her cheek and tell her to have fun, never questioning why these nights out always ended after midnight, sometimes 2, sometimes 3 in the morning. Then came the phone. She used to leave it on the counter without a thought. But one day I noticed she started carrying it everywhere, even into the shower. The lock screen changed from a photo of Lily to a generic ocean view. "Just like the colors better," she'd said when I asked. At company events, I began catching moments. Elena laughing a little too long at another man's joke. Her hand lingering on an arm in conversation. The subtle shift in her body language when she wanted to be noticed. And then there was Victor Hale. Victor and I had met in college, 2 broke kids who shared a knack for business and a taste for risk. While I was swinging hammers on summer jobs, Victor was learning the art of the pitch. He was the guy who could sell you an umbrella in the desert. Sharp suit, sharper tongue, and a smile that could charm the rust off a steel beam. When I started my company, he came in as my partner, bringing in deals while I managed the groundwork. For years, it worked. We were unstoppable. But Victor was different around Elena. I saw it early on, but I didn't want to see it. At first, it was harmless, or so I told myself. One evening, at a charity auction we sponsored, I caught him leaning close to her at the bar. "Careful, Hale," I said with a grin as I walked up. "That's my wife you're stealing all the laughs from." Victor smirked, swirling the whiskey in his glass. Can you blame me? If I had her at home, I'd never let her out of my sight. Elena chuckled and rolled her eyes, but I saw the way her lips curved at the compliment. Another time, during a rooftop party for our biggest client, Victor raised his glass toward me across the crowd. "To Mike," he called out, loud enough for half the guests to hear. The man who builds empires and still somehow convinced Elena to marry him. I shot back. "Yeah, well, I figured if I kept you close, you wouldn't try stealing her." He grinned like it was all a joke, but there was a glint in his eyes, the kind that made me wonder if the joke was really on me. Still, I brushed it off. I'd known Victor for decades. I trusted him with my business, my livelihood. And Elena? She was my wife. She'd promised me forever under an oak tree with her hand in mine. Loyalty wasn't just expected, it was a given. At least, that's what I thought. One night, about a year before everything fell apart, I came home late from a site inspection. The house was dark except for the soft glow of the kitchen light. Elena was at the counter, phone in hand, smiling at the screen. "Hey," I said, dropping my keys into the dish by the door. "Who's got you grinning like that?" She turned the phone face down. "Just Sarah. She sent me a meme." I walked over, kissed her cheek, but the scent that met me wasn't hers. Not entirely. There was a faint trace of cologne. Not mine. "Victor stopped by today." I asked lightly. She froze for a fraction of a second, just enough to notice. "Oh yeah, he dropped off some documents for you." I wanted to press, but instead, I told myself not to be paranoid. I trusted her. I trusted them both. Looking back, I wonder if that was my biggest mistake, not the trust itself, but how blind I let it make me. There were other moments, too. At a summer barbecue with the crew, I noticed Victor watching her as she set plates on the picnic table. Not just watching, studying. Like he was memorizing every move. I walked over, beer in hand. "You planning to help? Or just enjoy the view?" I asked. Victor grinned without shame. "Why mess with perfection?" Elena laughed from across the table. "Don't encourage him, Mike." I told myself it was just banter. Friendly ribbing. The kind of lines Victor threw at every pretty woman. But deep down, something itched at the back of my mind. I just kept scratching around it instead of facing it. If there was a line between my wife and my best friend, I believed they'd never cross it. I believed that with the same stubborn certainty that kept me swinging hammers in the rain and closing deals against impossible odds. I didn't know it then, but the foundation I'd spent years building wasn't just cracked. It was already crumbling. Chapter 3, The Setup. The weeks before my arrest felt like the busiest of my career, the kind of time where you can't tell Monday from Saturday, because every day bleeds into the next. We'd landed a huge contract, the biggest in Carter and Hale Construction's history. A corporate development deal, luxury condos downtown, multi-million-dollar budget, long-term partnership potential. It was the kind of job that could lock in our company's future for decades. I was in my element. Blueprints, site visits, crew management, late-night calls with suppliers. I could already picture the completed skyline with our company name etched into its history. Victor, for once, was right there in the trenches with me, or so it seemed. He was showing up to meetings he normally left to me, volunteering to take the load off. I should have been grateful, and I was. But at the same time, Elena had started acting different. It began subtly. I'd come home from long days expecting a warm welcome, only to find her on the couch scrolling through her phone, barely glancing up. Conversations that used to flow effortlessly between us now felt clipped, half-hearted. One night, I walked into the kitchen to find her leaning against the counter, phone pressed her ear. She jumped slightly when she saw me. "Who's that?" I asked casually, grabbing a beer from the fridge. "Sarah," she said without missing a beat. "Talking about the fundraiser next month." She hung up quickly and changed the subject. Victor, meanwhile, started dropping by the house more often. Sometimes with documents, sometimes with takeout, sometimes for quick updates that somehow last an hour. At the office, strange things began to pop up in the books. Tiny discrepancies in the accounts, a payment posted to the wrong vendor, a missing invoice number. Little things I chalked up to clerical errors. "Hey, we've got another entry mistake here," I told our bookkeeper, Janet, one afternoon. Janet frowned. "That's weird. I've been double-checking everything. Must be a software glitch." I didn't think much of it at the time. After all, Victor was handling more of the financial side lately. He had access to everything. Then, one evening, while catching up on emails, I noticed a string of encrypted messages in the company server. The subject lines were all code-like, strings of numbers and letters. I opened one, only to be met with a wall of unreadable symbols. I called Victor about it. "Yeah, that's just IT's new security protocol," he said smoothly. "Keep sensitive info locked down. You know how these cyber guys are paranoid." I laughed it off. Guess I'm old school. Give me a blueprint and a pencil over that tech crap any day. "Exactly," Victor chuckled. "Leave the encryption stuff to me. Focus on the build." I didn't know it then, but that was the moment the noose tightened a little more around my neck. 2 weeks later, everything came crashing down. It was a Thursday morning. The crew was already on site, and I was in my office running over inspection reports. The sun was streaming through the blinds, dust motes floating lazily in the light. It was calm, too calm. Then the door slammed open. "Michael Carter?" I looked up to see 2 uniformed officers, followed by 3 men in suits. "Yeah, what's this about?" The lead officer stepped forward. "We have a warrant for your arrest on charges of fraud, embezzlement, and tax evasion." For a second, I thought it was some sick joke. "Hold on, what?" I stood, palms raised slightly. "Fraud? Tax evasion? That's insane. There's been a mistake." "Sir," step away from the desk. "Look, I think you've got the wrong." Before I could finish, they were on me. My wrists were yanked behind my back, cold steel cuffs biting into my skin. My crew, standing in the doorway, watched in stunned silence. "Tell them Victor," I shouted, searching for my partner. He appeared in the hallway, hands in his pockets, face unreadable. "Mike, I'm sorry," he said quietly. "They show me the evidence. I had to tell the truth." The truth. Those 2 words hit harder than the cuffs. "Are you kidding me?" I snarled, struggling against the officers. "Victor, you know me. I didn't take a damn cent." But he didn't answer, just looked away. They tore through my office, opening drawers, seizing my laptop, yanking files from cabinets. I caught glimpses of documents I'd never seen before, fake invoices, offshore account statements with my name on them. It was like watching my life rewritten in real time. As they led me out, my employees whispered to each other, their faces pale. The days that followed were a blur of interrogation rooms, legal jargon, and betrayal. My attorney, a young guy named Adams, tried to keep me hopeful, but the evidence against me was overwhelming. Bank transfers linked to my personal account, forged signatures that looked identical to mine, email chains from me authorizing illegal payments. At the preliminary hearing, Victor took the stand. He wore a somber expression, like a man reluctantly doing his duty. "I trusted Michael," he said, voice heavy with practiced sincerity. "I never imagined he could do something like this. But when I saw the transfers and the falsified reports, I knew I couldn't stay silent." Every word was a knife. And Elena, she sat in the gallery, staring straight ahead, not saying a single thing in my defense. During a recess, I caught her eye. "Elena," I said, my voice low but urgent. "You know I didn't do this. Tell them, please." She hesitated, then shook her head slightly. "Mike, I can't help you if this is true." "It's not true," I snapped, my frustration spilling over. "You know me better than anyone." But she just looked away. When the hearing resumed, the prosecution laid out their case like they'd been rehearsing it for months. Every detail lined up too perfectly, as if someone had scripted the whole thing. By the end of it, I realized something that chilled me to the core. It wasn't that they'd found the truth. It was that they'd created it. And there was nothing I could do to prove otherwise. Chapter 4, The Verdict and the Kiss. The courtroom felt different on verdict day. Not quieter, not louder, just heavier. Like the air itself had gained weight overnight. I sat at the defense table in my suit, cuffs hidden under the tablecloth to make the scene look cleaner for the jury. My attorney, Adams, shuffled papers beside me, though we both knew there was nothing left to shuffle. From the corner of my eye, I saw Elena enter. Her heels clicked against the polished floor, sharp and deliberate. The scent of her perfume, jasmine and vanilla, drifted toward me, the same fragrance she used to wear when we went out for dinner dates. But now it felt like a ghost of something I'd lost. She walked past me without a glance, her eyes fixed straight ahead, lips painted in a shade of red I didn't recognize. She took her seat in the front row, right next to Victor Hale. Victor didn't even pretend to be discreet anymore. He gave me a slow, measured smile, the kind you give someone you've already beaten. His arm draped casually over the back of Elena's chair. Adams leaned toward me. Don't react. Whatever happens, don't give them the satisfaction. Right, I muttered, though my knuckles were already white from gripping the edge of the table. All rise, the bailiff called. The jury filed in, their expressions carefully neutral, their eyes avoiding mine as though I were contagious. Not one of them looked at me. Not the older man in the tweed jacket, not the young woman who'd smiled politely on the first day. Every head tilted toward the floor or toward the judge. Judge Peterson's robe swayed as he settled into his seat. He glanced at the foreman. Has the jury reached a verdict? We have, Your Honor. My stomach tightened into a knot. The foreman, a middle-aged man with wire-rimmed glasses, cleared his throat and read from a folded piece of paper. On the charge of fraud, guilty. On the charge of embezzlement, guilty. On the charge of tax evasion, guilty. Each guilty landed like a hammer blow. Elena didn't flinch. Judge Peterson nodded solemnly. Michael Carter, the court sentences you to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The words rang in my head, drowning out the murmurs rippling through the gallery. Life. I forced myself to look up. I found Lily, my daughter, sitting on the other side of Elena. Her little hands were folded in her lap, her big brown eyes fixed on me. There was no judgment there, just a quiet sadness I couldn't bear. That was the only thing that kept me from losing it right then. If it weren't for her, I might have flipped the table, screamed, cursed the whole damn system. But I couldn't let her see me break. The bailiff stepped forward, and I stood as the judge dismissed the court. Chains rattled faintly in my wrists. Then, as if choreographed, Elena leaned toward Victor. The kiss was deliberate. Long enough for everyone to notice, slow enough to sting like acid. Her hand came up to cradle his face, her thumb stroking his cheek. He kissed her back with the smug ease of a man who'd already claimed the prize. A low murmur swept through the courtroom. Someone in the back even let out a soft, incredulous whistle. I stared, heat pounding in my ears. I wanted to shout her name. I wanted to tear Victor's smug face apart with my bare hands. But then I caught sight of Lily again, and I swallowed the rage like a mouthful of glass. When Elena finally pulled away from Victor, she turned her head just enough to meet my eyes. That faint smile, the one that used to melt me, was now something else entirely. Cold, triumphant. She leaned forward slightly, her voice low but aimed right at me. Such a shame, rot in prison, loser. The words slid into me like a blade, twisting as she sat back in her seat, her hand still resting lightly on Victor's arm. That was the moment I realized the woman I'd married was gone. Not stolen, not corrupted, gone. In her place sat someone who wanted me to suffer. Someone who'd made it her mission to see me destroyed. Chapter 5, Life in a Cell. The first thing they take from you is the sky. Not your clothes, not your name, not even your dignity. Those go later. But the moment the gates slam shut and you hear the echo ricochet off the walls, you realize you won't see the sky without bars for a long, long time. The prison smelled like a mix of sweat, bleach, and despair. No matter how much disinfectant they used, the stench of bodies and fear clung to the walls. The sound was worse, metal doors clanging, guards barking orders, inmates shouting in a dozen different voices. It was chaos, but the kind of chaos that had its own rules. Carter, move it, the guard grunted, shoving me forward. I was led down a narrow tier lined with cells, the steel doors covered in tiny rectangular slots. Eyes followed me from behind bars, some curious, some hostile, some sizing me up like fresh meat. I kept my head up, but my gaze steady, like I'd read you were supposed to do. Here you go, the guard said, stopping at a door near the middle. Home sweet home. The door screeched open, and I stepped inside. The cell was barely big enough for 2 bunks, a small sink, and a stainless steel toilet. The air inside was hotter, thicker, the smell of unwashed clothes and damp concrete. On the bottom bunk sat a man in his 50s, built like he'd been carved out of wood. His skin was dark and weathered, his head shaved, his jaw set in a way that suggested he'd won more fights than he'd lost. He didn't look up from the paperback in his hands. You snore? Not that I know of, I said. Good. Last guy did. Didn't last long. He slid a bookmark between the pages and set the book down. Name's Reggie. Michael. He nodded toward the top bunk. That's yours. Don't drop anything on me. And keep your shoes where you can grab him fast. You never know when they're going to pop the door in the middle of the night. I climbed up, the thin mattress sagging beneath me. The metal frame groaned with every shift of my weight. The pillow smelled faintly of bleach and something sour. Reggie studied me for a moment, his eyes sharp. You look like you're still trying to figure out how you got here. Something like that. He leaned back, folding his arms. First week's the hardest. You'll replay everything in your head, every decision, every word, every handshake you shouldn't have trusted. That loop will keep you up at night. He wasn't wrong. Even before he said it, the memories had already started rolling like a film I couldn't pause. Elena smiling across our kitchen table. Victor's smug nod at the trial. The jury looking anywhere but at me. Later, when the cell block went quiet and the hum of the overhead light became the only sound, I lay staring at the peeling paint above me, rewinding the tape in my mind. Where had it started? The first late night with friends. The way she laughed at Victor's jokes? The accounting errors? I went over it again and again, but there was no single moment that screamed betrayal. It had crept in like rot under fresh paint. At some point, I reached under my pillow and pulled out the single scrap of hope I had left. Lily's note. It was written on a torn piece of pink stationery, folded twice, the creases worn from my fingers. In her neat, careful handwriting, it said just 2 words and a number. 12 days. No explanation. No details. Just that. I found it tucked into the palm of my hand during the last time she hugged me before they took me away. I didn't know what it meant. 12 days until what? But somehow the way she'd written it, steady, certain, told me it wasn't random. I held it between my fingers like a talisman. I could almost hear her voice whispering it. 12 days, Dad. I didn't sleep that night. Not much, anyway. The next morning, Reggie was already up, doing push-ups beside his bunk. Rise and shine, Carter. Welcome to day 2 of forever. I climbed down, rubbing my neck. He noticed the paper in my hand. What's that? Nothing, I said, tucking it back under my pillow. He gave me a slow look, like he'd seen that kind of answer before. Something that keeps you breathing, huh? Maybe. He sat on the edge of his bunk, elbows on his knees. Listen, rookie, I'm not here to crush your spirit, but don't hang your sanity on some fairy tale. Out there, people promise you they'll fight for you. In here, you find out who meant it, and it's usually nobody. I met his eyes. This isn't just a promise. It's a fact. My daughter wrote it. Reggie's gaze is softened just a little, but only for a second. I hope you're right. But this place? It eats hope. Chews it up and spits it out. Don't starve yourself waiting for a miracle. He turned back to his book, but his words stuck in my head. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was clinging to something meaningless. But every time I thought about letting go of that note, I saw Lily's handwriting again. Those 2 words like a spark in the dark. The rest of the day passed in a blur of routines. Roll call, bland meals served on plastic trays, and hours locked back in the cell. Every hallway we walked echoed with catcalls, shouts, and the occasional thud of a fight breaking out somewhere beyond view. That night, lying on the top bunk, I held the note again, staring at the number. 12. Whatever it meant, it was all I had left to believe in, and I wasn't going to let this place take that from me. Chapter 6, The 12 Days Countdown. The first mark went up on the wall the morning after Lily's note had burned itself into my brain. One line, carved shallowly into the paint with a dull screw I'd found wedged behind the bunk frame. It didn't look like much, just a scratch on faded cinder block, but to me it was a promise. Day 1. Every morning after count, I'd add another line. Reggie noticed on the 3rd day. You building a calendar, Carter? He asked, leaning against the wall, his arms folded. Something like that. He didn't push further. Reggie wasn't the kind of man to pry unless he had to. But I caught him watching me sometimes, like he was waiting to see if I was counting up or counting down. On the 4th night, the memories started hitting harder. I was back in our bedroom. Elena was brushing her hair in front of the mirror, the scent of her perfume drifting through the room. She'd said she was going to her sister's for the night, something about needing to help with a leaky faucet. I believed her without question. But when she returned the next morning, her hair was slightly mussed, her blouse creased in a way that didn't match a night on a couch. And the scent, it wasn't her perfume anymore. It was Victor's cologne. That spicy, expensive blend I'd smelled on in the day. He shook my hand for the first time. Traffic was a nightmare, she'd said casually, tossing her bag onto the couch. You eat breakfast yet? I'd kissed her on the cheek, forcing myself to ignore the wrongness of it all. Now, lying on my bunk in a cell that reeked of bleach and stale sweat, I replayed that morning over and over. The way she avoided my eyes. The faint smile she couldn't quite hide. Day 5 went up on the wall. On the 7th day, another memory hit, sharper this time. Victor and I had been standing in the driveway, just after I'd changed the oil in my truck. He'd stopped by unannounced, leaning against the hood like he owned it. Elena had been inside, supposedly on a work call. You know, Michael, he'd said, smirking, I probably know your wife better than you think. It was the kind of thing that could have been a joke if his eyes hadn't lingered just a little too long on the front door. I'd laughed it off at the time, even clapping him on the shoulder. But deep down, something had shifted. It wasn't until now, sitting in a cage miles from home, that I realized he'd been telling the truth. By day 8, whispers had started to spread around the block. It wasn't hard to notice I wasn't like most new guys. I didn't pace the cell muttering, didn't make desperate calls on the prison phone, didn't beg for commissary favors. I kept my head down, my tone calm, my movements deliberate, and I kept counting. They saw me every morning, same time, same angle, marking the wall. Some thought it was for my sentence. Others thought I was planning something. Yo, Carter, a tall inmate named Devontae, called from across the tier one afternoon. You counting down to your own funeral or what? A few guys laughed, but it wasn't mean laughter. It was curiosity. Reggie didn't laugh. He just gave Devontae a long look until he backed off. That night, Reggie finally spoke. You know they're all watching you, right? Like buzzards waiting to see if you're going to drop something they can pick at. Let him watch, I said. That's exactly the kind of thing that makes him more interested. I didn't answer, because he was right. By day 9, the air in the cell block felt different. It wasn't just the stench of sweat and the lingering ammonia from the morning mop-up. It was the way conversations hushed when I walked by. The way eyes followed me from behind bars. I wasn't trying to create a spectacle. I was just trying to survive 12 days. But the quiet intensity, the way I clung to that note, must have looked like something else to them. The guy in the next cell over, Torres, leaned against the bars one evening and said, "Whatever you're waiting for, man, I hope it's worth it." I didn't answer, because if I said it out loud, it might break whatever spell was keeping me steady. Day 10, I sat on my bunk, staring at the wall, my fingers tracing the lines. 10 marks. 10 days gone. 2 left. My mind wouldn't stop drifting back to Elena's voice at the trial, the flat, cold way she said my name. To Victor's smug smirk as he adjusted his tie. To the way Lily's eyes searched for mine before they led me away in chains. The note had no explanation, but I knew it wasn't random. Lily had written it like a fact, like she already knew something no one else did. I'd bet everything on that certainty. On the 11th day, after lunch, Devontae passed my cell and muttered under his breath, "Something's about to go down." I didn't know if he meant me or just the usual prison drama, but spread fast. By evening, I could feel the weight of the entire tier's attention on me. Even the guards seemed to watch closer. Reggie shook his head. You're either going to walk out of here a free man in a couple days, or you're going to have a dozen guys asking you for the playbook. I smiled faintly. Guess we'll find out. Day 12. The last mark went up. The wall now had 12 short scratches, each one a day of waiting, of replaying every betrayal, of holding on to the only thing my daughter had given me. I sat back on my bunk, staring at them. 12 days. Exactly what Lily had promised. Exactly what I'd been counting on. Chapter 7. The twist unfolds. Day 12 began like any other. The clang of the tier gate, the bark of a guard's voice for morning count, the smell of burnt coffee drifting in from the mess hall. But the air felt different. I woke before Reggie stirred. My eyes locked on the 12 marks on the wall. The final one had gone up the night before. 12 scratches, each one a silent act of faith. Now, I just had to see if faith meant anything in a place like this. It was mid-morning when it happened. A guard I'd never spoken to much, stocky, shaved head, eyes like chipped ice, stopped at my cell. "Carter, on your feet." Reggie looked at me over the rim of his mug. "What's this about?" "Warden's office," the guard said. No explanation, no expression. That alone was enough to make every pair of eyes on the tier follow me as I stepped out. Warden's office calls weren't casual. You didn't get called up there unless you'd either done something serious or something serious was about to be done to you. The walk down the corridor felt like it took hours. My palms itched. My mind ran wild. Had someone finally taken a shot at Victor? Had Elena come forward? Or was this about some prison politics I'd been too careful to touch? When we reached the warden's door, the guard didn't knock. He just opened it. Inside, Warden Hayes was leaning back in his chair, his thick hands folded over his stomach. Beside him, two men in dark suits sat with clipped, unreadable expressions. Federal agents. You could smell that kind of authority a mile away. The taller of the two nodded at me. "Mr. Carter, have a seat." I sat, my pulse hammered. The shorter agent reached into his briefcase and pulled out a small, clear evidence bag. Inside was a black USB drive, scratched along one edge like it had been pried out of something in a hurry. "Do you recognize this?" he asked. "No," I said slowly. "Should I?" "You will." The taller agent laid a folder on the desk and flipped it open. Inside were still shots from security cameras, screenshots of bank transactions, and, my stomach twisted, images of my own signature on documents I'd never seen before. "These," the agent said, tapping the photos, "are part of a file we received anonymously 2 days ago. The files were taken from a password-protected laptop belonging to your wife, Elena Carter." Warden Hayes didn't move, didn't blink, just watched me like a man who'd seen too many stories go sideways. The agent continued, "We also have video recordings obtained without her knowledge, showing both Elena Carter and a man identified as Victor Ramirez forging documents, accessing your accounts, and transferring funds into shell companies under their control. They framed you, Mr. Carter, and they were sloppy enough to leave a trail." I couldn't breathe for a second. Every muscle in my body felt wired tight. "They what?" "Everything that put you here," the shorter agent said, "was manufactured, and we have enough evidence now to prove it beyond question." My voice was low. "Where'd it come from?" "You said it was anonymous." The taller agent smiled faintly, not a happy smile, but the kind that said he respected the move. He pulled out another evidence bag. Inside was a plain brown envelope, creased and a little smudged. Across the front, written in uneven blue marker, were 3 words in a child's handwriting. "For my dad." My throat closed. The agent said, "The package was postmarked from your hometown. No return address." Inside the envelope was the USB drive, along with a short note explaining where the files had been hidden, a false bottom drawer in your wife's home office desk. I couldn't stop staring at those 3 words. I'd know that handwriting anywhere. Lily. The rest came out in pieces. Apparently, Lily had gone to stay with my sister during the trial. My niece Samantha, 21, a college dropout with a gift for technology that made her both terrifying and brilliant, had been helping around the house. Lily had told her about Mom's secret laptop that she wasn't allowed to touch. Samantha had decided to take a look. It hadn't been easy. There were passwords, encrypted folders, files buried in layers of fake directories. But Samantha didn't back down from puzzles. They found more than they could have imagined: financial statements, fake correspondence, falsified timestamps, even video from a hidden camera in Victor's own study, catching him and Elena laughing about how easy Michael made it for them. Samantha had copied everything onto a USB. But instead of calling me, which she knew she couldn't, she'd helped Lily write a simple note, stuck it in the envelope, and mailed it to the only place she could think of where it would get into the right hands. The local FBI field office. I sat there in the warden's office, my hands gripping the edge of the chair, every detail sinking in like blows to the ribs. Reggie's voice echoed in my mind from just days ago. "Don't get your hopes up." But I had, and now I knew why. The agent slid the folder toward me. "We're here because this changes everything. We're filing a motion to have your conviction overturned." The process will take time, but the evidence is rock solid. In the meantime, we wanted you to know. I glanced at the warden, half expecting him to smirk, to tell me not to get ahead of myself. But Hayes just nodded once. You've been quiet in here, Carter. Kept your head down. Looks like it paid off. The taller agent leaned forward. One more thing. This was risky for them. If your wife and Ramirez find out who sent this, they might try to retaliate. We'll make sure your daughter and niece are protected. That broke something in me. The idea of Lily, tiny and stubborn, risking anything to help her father, it made the 12 days on the wall feel like nothing. I didn't trust my voice, so I just nodded. When they dismissed me, the guard led me back down the hallway. The walk felt different now, lighter, but also heavier with everything that still had to happen. When I stepped back into the block, Reggie was sitting on his bunk, arms crossed. Well, he asked. I just looked at him, the faintest smile pulling at my mouth. Let's just say, you might have been wrong about getting my hopes up. He grunted. Huh, guess we'll see. And that's where the chapter ends, with Michael now knowing Lily was behind the anonymous package, but the weight of what comes next still hanging in the air. Chapter 8, Freedom and Fury. The morning of my release didn't feel real. They handed me back the clothes I'd been wearing the night I was arrested. Jeans that hung a little looser now, a faded button-down, and shoes with soles so worn I could feel the cold through them. My wrists felt naked without the cuffs. The steel gates clanged open, and I stepped into blinding daylight. For a second, I froze. Then the noise hit me. Michael, over here. How does it feel to be a free man? Do you have a message for your wife? What's your first move now? A wall of microphones and flashing cameras pressed forward, reporters jostling like wolves who'd scented blood. I kept my eyes ahead, jaw tight. A younger journalist shoved in close enough for me to smell her perfume. Mr. Carter, is it true Victor Ramirez and your wife have both been denied bail? I didn't answer, didn't even slow down. They shouted more, questions about betrayal, about money, about justice. I walked straight through them, the only sound from me the crunch of gravel under my shoes. If they wanted a statement, they could wait. My words weren't for the world. Not yet. They were for her. A black sedan idled at the curb. The back door swung open, and I slid inside, the tinted glass muffling the chaos outside. Samantha was behind the wheel. Lily sat in the passenger seat, twisting her hands in her lap until she saw me. Then she turned, eyes wide, and smiled so big it hurt to look at. Dad. I swallowed hard. Hey, kiddo. The moment I said it, she unbuckled and crawled into the back seat, wrapping her arms around me. She was taller, her hair a little longer, but she still fit against me like she had when she was small. I held her tight, breathing her in, willing myself not to break in front of her. When she finally pulled back, I looked at Samantha. I heard what you did, what you both did. Samantha shrugged, but her eyes were sharp. Wasn't hard once we found the laptop. The hard part was keeping your daughter from telling Elena to her face. Lily gave a defiant little grin. I was this close. She held up 2 fingers almost touching. What happened? I asked. Samantha glanced at Lily, then back at me. A couple weeks ago, she was at the house, upstairs in her room. Elena and Ramirez thought they were alone. They had a bottle of wine open, laughing, talking about how you folded right into the trap. They actually said those words. Lily's small fist clenched. They said you were too trusting to ever suspect them. They laughed about it. Her voice wavered. I couldn't let that be the end. I stared at her, the weight of what she'd done, what it meant, sinking into me. Samantha continued. She came straight to me. We waited until Elena left for the gym, then went into her office. That's when we found a false bottom in the desk drawer. The laptop was there, along with an external drive. I pulled everything, emails, bank transfers, even videos from Victor's study. She shook her head in disbelief. They were so confident they weren't even careful. I mean, they brag about framing you on camera. My hand curled into fists. I could see Elena's smirk in my mind, the one she used when she thought she was the smartest person in the room. Lily's voice broke through my thoughts. I wrote the note. I didn't know what else to say. Just for my dad. I reached out and took her hand, squeezing it gently. You did more than I could have ever asked for, Lily. You gave me my life back. Her eyes glistened, and I saw the same stubborn spark that had once made her argue about bedtime when she was 8. I pulled her into another hug, my voice low against her hair. I'm proud of you, more than you'll ever know. When I let her go, I sat back, my jaw tight again, but for a different reason now. Gratitude was a warm burn in my chest, but underneath it, darker and hotter, was something else. Anger. Not the kind that fades. The kind that waits, that sharpens with time. As we drove, Samantha kept me updated. Victor and Elena had both been arrested the day before, charged with conspiracy, fraud, and perjury. The evidence we'd given them was airtight. Federal agents had raided both their homes, seizing accounts, hard drives, and anything else with a cord. They were caught off guard, Samantha said with satisfaction. Elena was still in her robe when they took her. Ramirez tried to talk his way out of it, but the agents didn't even bother listening. I pictured it, Elena, standing barefoot on the tile, hair uncombed, watching her perfect world crack apart in front of her. It should have felt like enough. It didn't. Lily leaned forward from the back seat, looking between us. So does that mean it's over? I hesitated. Samantha shot me a knowing look. For them? Not even close, I said finally. For us? We'll see. The rest of the ride was quiet, except for the hum of the engine. Every mile we put between us, and that prison felt like shedding a layer of weight, but there was one I couldn't shake. It wasn't just about getting my life back. It was about what they'd taken, what they'd thought they could destroy without consequence. Elena hadn't just betrayed me. She'd used me. She'd gutted our family for her convenience. Now she was sitting in a cell, probably replaying every choice she'd made. Good. Let her stew. But the first word she heard from me wouldn't come through a news clip. They'd be face to face. When Samantha pulled into my sister's driveway, Lily was the first one out of the car. She turned, waiting for me. As I stepped out, the sun hit my face. It was warm, but all I felt was the cold edge of the plan forming in my head. I wasn't going to shout. I wasn't going to make a scene. When the time came, I was going to look Elena in the eye and make her understand exactly what she'd done and what it was going to cost her. And until that moment, I'd let the fury build. Chapter 9, The Confrontation. The county detention center smelled like bleach and stale air. A heavy silence hung in the visitor lobby, broken only by the faint buzz of fluorescent lights and the occasional metallic clang from somewhere deep inside. I checked in with the desk officer, slid my ID across the scratch counter, and signed the logbook. She looked at me over the top of her glasses, like she knew exactly who I was and why I was here. Visiting inmate 4269, she asked. Yeah. My voice was calm. Flat. She nodded, made a note, and gestured for me to follow a guard. The walk to the visitation area felt longer than it was. My shoes squeaked against the polished concrete. Somewhere down another corridor, a man's voice shouted before being abruptly silenced. The guard led me into a small room lined with plexiglass partitions. A row of plastic chairs sat on either side, telephones bolted to the wall. I took a seat in the middle, facing the empty chair across the glass. I didn't have to wait long. Elena appeared, escorted by another officer. She wore an orange jumpsuit that hung loose on her frame, her hair a tangled mess, her face pale without the layers of makeup she used to wear like armor. She still had that instinctive sway to her hips, though even in county slippers, old habits die hard. When she saw me, her lips parted and her eyes glistened like she'd been waiting for this moment. She sat down, picked up the phone, and pressed it to her ear. I didn't move at first, just looked at her. Michael, her voice trembled. God, I'm so glad you came. I picked up the phone slowly, resting it against my ear without breaking eye contact. I'm sure you are. Her chin quivered. I made a mistake. I didn't know what I was doing. Victor, he manipulated me. You have to believe me. There it was. The performance. The same one she used to get out of traffic tickets, to talk her way into special treatment at restaurants, to turn every fight we'd ever had into my fault. I let a small smile creep onto my face. Funny, you didn't look manipulated when you were kissing him in front of our daughter. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. She looked down, fumbling with the cord of the phone, her fingers shaking. I didn't mean for Lily to see that. He said, Don't. I cut in, my voice sharp enough to make her flinch. Don't stand there and feed me the same crap you probably rehearse in front of a mirror. You knew exactly what you were doing. You wanted her to see. She pressed her lips together, then tried again, softer. I loved you, Michael. I still do. I laughed. Not loud, but enough to make her eyes flick up in confusion. You love me? Is that what love looks like to you? Framing me. Watching me get hauled away in handcuffs, and then playing house with the guy who helped do it. Her eyes filled again, and for a second, I almost believed the tears. But then I remembered Samantha's voice telling me about the laptop, about the laughter, about the bragging. You think I don't know what you said? I lean a little closer to the glass. You and Victor sitting there with your wine, talking about how easy it was to set me up, laughing about how trusting I was. Elena's breathing hitched, but she didn't deny it. I let the silence stretch between us, the hum of the lights filling the space. Then I spoke, slow and deliberate. You'll never see Lily again. Her head jerked up. What? You heard me. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. She doesn't need a mother who thinks betrayal is just another hobby. She's with people who care about her now. You're not even a shadow in her life anymore. Her composure cracked. You can't do that. She's my daughter. No, I said, leaning forward until my forehead nearly touched the glass. She's our daughter, and the difference between us is I never stopped being her parent. She gripped the phone tighter, knuckles white. Michael, please save it. You didn't think about her when you were in Victor's bed. You didn't think about her when you signed your name on those fake documents. You didn't think about her when you were laughing about the trap you set for me. You only think about her now because you realize she's gone. Her lower lip trembled, and for once, she didn't have a quick line ready. The guard at the far wall glanced at his watch, then at me. 5 more minutes. I stood slowly, the chair legs scraping against the concrete. Elena's eyes darted up, panic flashing in them. You're leaving? Yeah. I stepped closer to the glass, close enough that she leaned forward instinctively. I lowered my voice, so only she could hear through the line. You wanted to see me broken, didn't you? You thought I'd come in here angry, begging for answers. But you know what I see when I look at you now? Her brow furrowed. What? A loser. And not just because you're in here. You were always a loser, Elena. You just dressed it up better back then. Her eyes hardened. You think you've won? I smirked. Oh no, this isn't winning. This is just the part where you start realizing how long you're going to lose for. The guard started toward us, ready to signal time. I didn't wait. I leaned in, just enough for my words to land like a blade between her ribs. Rot in here, loser. I hung up the phone before she could answer and walked away without looking back. Chapter 10, The New Life. The moment I stepped back into the office, it felt different. The sleek glass doors no longer carried the ghosts of Elena's lies. Instead, they opened to a new beginning, one I was determined to own. The sunlight filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows over the polished conference table. Samantha sat at the head of the table, a stack of reports and a laptop open in front of her. She looked up as I walked in, her face breaking into a smile, sharp, confident, no nonsense. Welcome back, boss, she said. I returned the smile. Feels good to hear that again. She motioned to a thick binder. I've reorganized the financials, streamlined some departments, cut some of the fat Victor and Elena left behind. I nodded, flipping through the pages. Everything was tighter, cleaner, more transparent. Exactly what I needed. I'm glad you're running the numbers now, I said. I was too blind before to see what they were doing. Don't waste time on what happened, Samantha replied. Focus on what's next. Her words hit home. I took a deep breath and let the past fade into a distant memory. That afternoon, I drove Lily to our new house, a modest but sturdy place on the edge of town, surrounded by tall oaks and wide open sky. The kind of home a kid could grow up in without fear or chaos. Lily bounced in the passenger's seat, her eyes bright, clutching a stuffed bear she'd refused to part with even during the worst of the trial. Do you like it? I asked, unlocking the door. She threw her arms around me. It's perfect. Inside, the room smelled faintly of fresh paint and new beginnings. I watched her explore every corner, open every closet, touch every window, as if she was claiming it for herself. This was more than just a house. It was a promise. That evening, after Lily had fallen asleep, I sat alone on the back porch, the night air cool against my skin. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through old pictures, smiling faces from better times, moments before everything shattered. A sharp pang hit my chest, but it was tempered by something stronger. Justice hadn't come easy. The betrayal cut deeper than I ever imagined. But I was still here, still standing. And now, I was building again. Samantha's voice came through in a text. "Company's on track. You're doing better than you think." I smiled and replied, "Thanks. Couldn't have done it without you." She answered quickly, "We're just getting started." That was the truth. Weeks turned into months. I dedicated more time to Lily than I ever had before. No more late nights, no more missed dinners. I was determined to be the father she needed and deserved. At school events, I sat in the front row, cheering the loudest. On weekends, we explored parks, built forts, and planned stargazing nights. She was healing, and so was I. One afternoon, Samantha came over with a proposal. "I want to launch a new project," she said, excitement crackling in her voice. "A digital platform for managing contracts and transparency. Something that makes it impossible for anyone to pull the kind of stunt Elena and Victor did." I considered it, then nodded. "Make it happen. Let's turn this nightmare into a shield for others." Her grin was all the encouragement I needed. That night, as I tucked Lily into bed, she looked up and whispered, "Dad, you're my hero." My throat tightened. "No, kiddo, you are." She smiled sleepily, and I kissed her forehead, feeling a quiet peace I hadn't known in years. In the quiet moments, I often reflected on what had broken me and what had rebuilt me stronger. Betrayal had been a crucible. Fire had burned away the weak parts of me. What remained was harder, sharper, and more real. I wasn't just rebuilding a company. I was rebuilding a life. One founded not on lies or trust misplaced, but on truth, loyalty, and love. Some people spend their lives building empires. I spend mine building something better, a life no traitor can touch.